In Buffalo, New York, rises a monument to a promise that was never kept. 17 stories above the east side, a tower of limestone and brick catches the morning light. Its windows, some whole and some broken, reflect the clouds drifting over Lake Erie. From a distance, it looks almost alive, waiting. This is Buffalo's Central Terminal, and if you know where to look, the dream it was meant to be remains visible. Built in 1929, it was designed to handle more than 200 trains and 10,000 passengers every day. It had restaurants that served 250 people at once, a concourse that architects called one of the greatest public spaces ever created in America, and a spirit that promised Buffalo would be a city of the future. But less than a year after it opened, the world changed, and Buffalo Central Terminal, this temple to progress and speed, became something else entirely. An emblem of timing, of distance, of dreams that arrived just a moment too late. Today, walk through its empty halls and the echoes persist. The click of heels on marble, the hiss of steam, the voices of soldiers saying goodbye. And if you listen closely, you might also hear the whisper of a question that haunts every grand building left behind. What happened here? If you enjoy uncovering the darker histories hidden behind grand estates, you're welcome to subscribe and explore more with me. To understand Buffalo Central Terminal, you must first understand the city that built it. In the 1920s, Buffalo was not what it is today. It was a giant, one of America's largest cities, a roaring industrial powerhouse that sat at the crossroads of the Great Lakes and the Erie Canal. Ships carried grain, steel, and coal through its ports. Factories hummed day and night, and 13 trunkline railways connected Buffalo to every major city in the Northeast. In the language of railroads, Buffalo was second only to Chicago. The city sat at the midpoint between New York City's Grand Central Terminal and Chicago's LaSalle Street Station, forming the beating heart of the New York Central Railroad's empire. Trains like the legendary 20th Century Limited thundered through Buffalo on their way across the country, and the city's two downtown stations, Exchange Street and Terrace, were packed beyond capacity. But there was a problem. Both stations were old. Exchange Street dated back to before the Civil War. Its platforms were narrow, its tracks tangled, and its location deep in the downtown core created chaos. Trains had to back into the station in a time-consuming Y-shaped maneuver. Important express trains, including the famous 20th Century Limited, often skipped Buffalo entirely because stopping there took too long. For a city as proud and powerful as Buffalo, this was unacceptable. The New York Central Railroad had a vision. They would build a new station, a grand central terminal that would rival anything in the country. It would be modern, efficient, and magnificent. It would prove to the world that Buffalo was not just a stop along the way, but a destination in itself. And they believed, with absolute certainty, that Buffalo would keep growing. Within a few decades, the city's population would swell from 555,000 to more than 1.5 million people. That the future was limitless. So in 1925, they chose a site, not downtown, where land was expensive and crowded, but 2.5 miles to the east, in a middle-class Polish neighborhood along the main rail line. The land was cheaper, the space was open, and the railroad believed that the city would expand eastward to meet them, that before long, this distant location would be the new center of a sprawling metropolis. They hired the best architects they could find. Alfred T. Fellheimer and Stuart Wagner were not just any architects. They were masters of transportation design, specialists in the art of building not just stations, but experiences. Before Buffalo, Fellheimer had worked on Grand Central Terminal in New York and on stations in St. Paul, Schenectady, Utica, and Detroit. He understood how people moved through space, how light and sound could shape emotion, and how a building could tell a city's story in stone and steel. When Fellheimer and Wagner arrived in Buffalo, they brought with them the language of art, Deco, a style that was sweeping across America in the 1920s. Art Deco was modern, geometric, and bold. It loved symmetry, loved light, and loved showing off. It borrowed from ancient Egypt, from Mayan temples, from the machine age itself. Skyscrapers, ocean liners, and jazz clubs all embraced this aesthetic, the visual language of a world that believed tomorrow would always be bigger and brighter than today. For Buffalo Central Terminal, they designed something extraordinary. The heart of the complex would be a 17-story octagonal tower, 271 feet tall, rising like a beacon above the east side. At night, powerful lights would illuminate its peak, visible for 15 miles in every direction. The tower would house 1,500 New York Central employees and modern offices with tall windows and clean lines. At the base of the tower would be the entrance lobby, a grand space where passengers would flow in from the circular plaza outside. And beyond that, stretching to the east, would be the passenger concourse, a cathedral-like hall 225 feet long, 66 feet wide, and 63 feet high, with Roman arches framing windows so large they seemed to hold the sky itself. The architects didn't just design a train station, they designed a city within a city. 14 passenger tracks would be served by 7 concrete platforms. A 450-foot train concourse would feature bulletin boards announcing departures. The plans called for a restaurant seating 250, a waiting room painted to look like an open sky, a ladies' lounge as opulent as the finest theater, and shops selling everything a traveler might need: books, flowers, cigars, shoe repairs, fresh fruit. And everywhere, in every detail, beauty. Step inside Buffalo Central Terminal in your imagination, as it looked on the day it opened. It is June 22, 1929. The afternoon sun pours through the tall windows of the concourse, and you are standing on terrazzo floors made from 4 shades of marble: soft Tennessee cedar, pink Tennessee, creamy Botticino, and deep red Verona. The patterns beneath your feet are geometric, precise, mesmerizing. Above you, the ceiling rises in a soaring vault of Guastavino tile, a special curved tile that took 8 months to install because of its complexity. The tiles don't just look beautiful, they serve a purpose. They curve the sound, absorbing the echoes of footsteps and voices and the distant rumble of trains below, so that even in a space this vast, you can hear yourself think. Light pours in from the massive arched windows that frame the eastern end of the concourse. These windows are so large, so perfectly placed, that they seem to dissolve the wall entirely. When you look toward them, you see not just glass, but the whole world beyond. Sky, clouds, the platforms where trains wait like patient giants. Along the walls, clouded Botticino marble rises 15 feet high, forming a wainscot that glows softly in the light. Above it, sconces of frosted glass and polished metal cast gentle pools of light. At the apexes of the domed ceilings at either end of the concourse, geometric light fixtures hang like stars frozen in place, and all around the perimeter, tulip-shaped lights bloom from the walls, delicate and modern at once. Walk to the ticket office, and you'll find 18 windows, each framed with bronze grillwork in intricate geometric patterns. Behind those windows, 46 ticket sellers work with quiet efficiency, each with their own cabinet of tickets that they can lock and wheel away at the end of their shift. Above the windows, metal finials shaped like fleur-de-lis crown the pilasters, catching the light like little crowns. From the ticket office, a short walk leads you to the baggage check, where a clever spiral chute connects the concourse level to the baggage room. Below, drop your suitcase here, and it will slide down to the platforms, ready to be loaded onto your train. And at the center of it all, the clock, a 4-sided masterpiece of glass and metal rising 14 feet tall, its face glowing soft gold. Inside the clock's glass globe is a green light that can be switched on silently to alert the New York Central Police in case of an emergency. For 50 years, this clock will be the heart of the concourse, the place where people say, "Meet me by the clock," or "Meet me by the buffalo." The buffalo. Yes, there is a buffalo. At the eastern end of the concourse, near the entrance to the train platforms, you'll find a statue called Stuffy, a life-size bison created with iron wire, papier-mâché, and a real bison hide. On loan from the Buffalo Museum of Science since 1895, it becomes an instant landmark when placed in the terminal. From 1929 to 1945, travelers use it as a meeting point, and during World War II, soldiers heading off to war rub its nose for good luck, pulling tufts of hair as keepsakes until it becomes too worn to remain on display. In 1945, the museum reclaimed Stuffy, and the New York Central Railroad commissions the New York display firm of Messmore and Damon to create a replacement. The new Buffalo is sculpted from clay and papier-mâché, painted to look like bronze, keeping watch over the concourse for more than 30 years. A silent witness to every arrival and every farewell. But if there is one space in Buffalo Central Terminal that captures the full spirit of Art Deco, it is the dining room. This is the crown jewel of the building, a space so carefully designed that visitors stop in the doorway just to stare. The room is 100 feet long and 56 feet deep, large enough to seat 250 people. But size isn't what takes your breath away, it's the detail. At the center of the room is a W-shaped lunch counter, made of black Carrara glass, polished so smooth it reflects the ceiling like a dark mirror. The counter is bordered with silver and bronze grillwork, delicate as lace, dividing the space into 3 sections: coffee shop, lunchroom, and formal dining area. The walls are lined with black and gold-veined marble, cool to the touch and impossibly elegant. The floor is patterned with trapezoids of red, green, black, and ivory, laid out in a rhythm that makes you want to walk slowly, to let your eyes trace the lines. The light fixtures hang from the ceiling like frozen fireworks, geometric and modern, casting soft pools of light onto the tables below. More than just a place to eat, the dining room offers an experience, a stage to be seen, to pause, to feel part of something grand. Businessmen sit here reading the morning paper over coffee and toast. Families gather before long journeys, sharing one last meal together. And travelers passing through, people who will never see Buffalo again, sit at the counter and think, this city knows how to build. On June 22, 1929, Buffalo Central Terminal opens its doors. The event becomes the largest the city has ever seen. More than 2,200 invited guests fill the concourse for a grand Chamber of Commerce luncheon. There are speeches, band music, flags, and bunting. Politicians and railroad executives stand at podiums and talk about the future, about progress, about Buffalo's place in the modern world. At 2 o'clock in the afternoon, the crowd moves to the platforms to watch the ceremonial departure of the eastbound Empire State Express. The train hisses, releases a plume of white steam, and begins to roll. The crowd cheers, children wave, and at midnight, full service begins. 200 trains a day, the hum of engines, the call of conductors, the shuffle of thousands of passengers moving through the concourse like a river. In its first year, 91,420 New York. Central trains pass through Buffalo. The terminal is everything the city hoped it would be. Grand, efficient, modern. Passengers arrive from New York, Chicago, Boston, Detroit, and Toronto. They step off the trains and into the concourse, and they look up at the vaulted ceilings, the marble walls, the golden light, and they think, this is a city that matters. For a brief, shining moment, Buffalo Central Terminal becomes more than just a building, a promise fulfilled. But the world was about to change. 4 months after Buffalo Central Terminal opened on October 29, 1929, the stock market crashed. The news spread like wildfire through cities across America. Fortunes vanished overnight. Banks closed. Factories shut down. And the Great Depression began. For the New York Central Railroad, the impact was devastating. In 1929, the railroad's passenger revenue had been more than $130 million. By 1933, it had fallen to just $53 million, a 60% drop. Net revenue fell even harder. The trains kept running, but the passengers were gone. The grand terminal that had been built to handle 10,000 people a day now sat half empty, its marble floors echoing with the footsteps of a few hundred travelers. The timing could not have been worse. Buffalo Central Terminal had cost $14 million to build, a staggering sum in an era when $1 million could build an entire neighborhood. The railroad had invested everything in the belief that Buffalo would keep growing, that passenger rail would keep thriving, that the future was bright. Instead, they found themselves saddled with a massive, expensive building in the middle of the worst economic crisis in American history. And there was another problem, one that would haunt the terminal for the rest of its life: the location. That decision to build 2.5 miles east of downtown, which had seemed so smart in 1925, now felt like a mistake. The city did not expand eastward as predicted. The Polish neighborhood around the terminal did not transform into a bustling commercial district, and passengers, especially those arriving by car, found it inconvenient to travel so far from downtown hotels and businesses. The old Exchange Street station, despite being outdated and cramped, remained popular because it was walkable, central, familiar. Many passengers continued to use it even after Central Terminal opened. The New York Central found itself operating two stations in the same city, which made no financial sense. But they couldn't close Exchange Street without angering passengers, and they couldn't abandon Central Terminal after spending $14 million on it. So they did what struggling companies always do. They waited and hoped things would improve. For a decade, Buffalo Central Terminal limped along. Passenger numbers stayed low. The dining room served fewer meals. The shops struggled. But the building remained beautiful, maintained by a skeleton staff who polished the marble and kept the lights burning. Then, in 1941, everything changed again. The United States entered World War II. Suddenly, the trains were full. Soldiers poured through Buffalo on their way to training camps, to ports, to deployment. Families came to see them off, crowding the platforms with tears and waving handkerchiefs. The concourse filled with the sound of boots on marble, the murmur of prayers, the laughter of young men trying to stay brave. The terminal became a place of goodbyes. Young women stood by the clock, waiting for one last moment with sweethearts in uniform. Mothers pressed packages of food into their sons' hands. And the Golden Buffalo watched it all, silent and steady, as soldiers reached out to touch it for luck before boarding the train. For 5 years, Buffalo Central Terminal served a purpose it was never designed for. It became a gateway to war, a threshold between home and the unknown. And in those years, it earned a place in the hearts of a generation. Decades later, veterans would return to Buffalo, stand in the empty concourse, and remember the day they left. The fear, the hope, the feeling that they might never come back. But when the war ended in 1945, the soldiers came home, and the trains, once again, began to empty. The world after World War II was different. America had tasted victory and prosperity, and it wanted something new. It wanted freedom, speed, and independence. It wanted the automobile. In the 1950s, cars became more than transportation. They became symbols of success, of modernity, of the American dream. Highways spread across the country like veins. Suburbs bloomed on the edges of cities, and people who once took the train to visit family or conduct business now drove themselves, enjoying the freedom to leave when they wanted, stop where they wanted, and carry as much luggage as they wanted. Airlines, too, began to grow. Flying was faster, more glamorous, more exciting. By the late 1950s, a businessman could fly from New York to Chicago in a few hours instead of spending a night on a sleeper train. The choice was obvious. Passenger rail traffic collapsed. Across America, grand stations began to close. Penn Station in New York was demolished in 1963, only 53 years after it opened. The Singer Tower, once the tallest building ever destroyed, fell in 1968. The wreckers moved from city to city, erasing the monuments of the railroad age. Buffalo Central Terminal tried to survive. In 1955, desperate for money, the New York Central Railroad put the terminal up for sale for $1 million, 1/14 of what it had cost to build. There were no buyers. In 1959, a company called Buff Prop Enterprises negotiated a lease, but it ended within a year. Service to Niagara Falls was discontinued in 1961. In 1966, the railroad made a grim decision. To reduce taxes and maintenance costs, they demolished the Pullman service building, the coach shop, the ice house, and the powerhouse. The complex that had once employed 1,500 people was being dismantled, piece by piece. The trains that still stopped at Central Terminal grew fewer and fewer. By the 1970s, only a handful remained. The Lakeshore Limited to Chicago, the Niagara Rainbow to Detroit, and a few local routes. The Grand Concourse, built to handle 3,200 passengers an hour, now echoed with emptiness. In 1971, Amtrak took over passenger rail service in the United States. They inherited a dying industry and a broken system, and they had no money to fix it. When they looked at Buffalo Central Terminal, they saw a massive, beautiful and utterly impractical building. It cost $150,000 a year just to heat. The roof leaked, the plumbing was failing, and only 4 trains a day stopped there. Amtrak made a decision: reopen the old Exchange Street station downtown and close Central Terminal. A small new station would be built in Depew, 10 miles east of Buffalo, to serve travelers heading out of the city. On October 28, 1979, at 4:10 in the morning, the westbound Lakeshore Limited pulled out of Buffalo Central Terminal. It was the last train to ever leave the station. 50 years and 4 months after the grand opening, the lights went dark. A local builder named Anthony Fedele bought the property for $75,000, less than the cost of a single home in some neighborhoods. He had big plans. He envisioned Central Terminal Plaza, a mixed-use development with a hotel, offices, restaurants, and shops. He even moved into the building himself, creating an apartment on the second floor of the tower where he could live and work. For a decade, Anthony Fedele tried. He hosted events, polka parties, boxing matches, Dingus Day celebrations in the Polish neighborhood. He rented out small spaces to businesses. He kept the building clean and tried to show the world that it could still have a future. But the money never came. Investors were not interested in a neighborhood that was declining, in a building that was too far from downtown, in a dream that seemed to belong to another era. In 1983, Fedele fell behind on his taxes. In 1986, he defaulted, and the building was put up for auction. Only one person bid. Thomas Telesco paid $100,000 and promised to turn the terminal into a banquet hall or restore rail service. He did neither. What happened next is the darkest chapter in the story of Buffalo Central Terminal. Thomas Telesco and the owners who came after him did not see the building as a treasure. They saw it as a source of salvage. They saw copper, bronze, marble, and glass that could be removed and sold. Piece by piece, the terminal was stripped. Iron railings were torn from staircases. Light fixtures were pried from the walls. Signs were pulled down. The beautiful bronze grillwork from the ticket windows disappeared. Ceiling panels were smashed to reach the copper wiring above. The concourse clock, that golden 4-sided treasure, was sold to a dealer and ended up in a Chicago antique shop. One day, a truck backed into the plaster buffalo statue while workers were trying to remove ceiling lights. The statue shattered. The symbol that had watched over travelers for more than 30 years was destroyed, swept up, and thrown away like garbage. Water mains broke and were left unfixed. Freeze-thaw cycles caused ice to pull at the foundations. Without heat, the building was exposed to Buffalo's brutal winters. Snow blew in through broken windows. Rain poured through holes in the roof. Puddles formed on the marble floors, soaking into the terrazzo, cracking the tiles. The building was not secured. Vandals broke in and spray-painted the walls. Arsonists set fires in empty rooms. Urban explorers climbed through windows, walking through the ruins with flashlights, taking photographs of the decay. And the city, overwhelmed by larger problems, did nothing. By the 1990s, Buffalo Central Terminal had become one of the most famous ruins in America. Photographers came from around the world to capture its haunting beauty. Sunlight streaming through broken windows, ivy crawling up walls, staircases leading to nowhere. The images were stunning, heartbreaking, and tragic. The terminal appeared in books, documentaries, and galleries as an icon of urban decay, abandoned dreams, and the cost of progress. For many people, it became the face of Buffalo's decline, proof that even the grandest promises can crumble. But some people saw something else. In 1984, while the terminal was still under Fedele's ownership, it was placed on the National Register of Historic Places. The designation came with a simple description: a virtually intact representative example of the Art Deco style in Buffalo. Recognition, at least, that the building mattered and deserved remembering. But being on the register did not guarantee protection. No funding arrived, no. Asset repairs were mandated. The title meant little. And for years, that designation felt like a cruel joke as the building continued to decay. Then, in 1997, something changed. A man named Scott Field, working with the Preservation Coalition of Erie County, decided that Buffalo Central Terminal was worth saving. He gathered a small group of preservationists, architects, historians, community activists, and they made an offer to the building's owners. They bought Buffalo Central Terminal for $1. In return, they assumed $70,000 in back taxes and took on the enormous responsibility of caring for a 17-story ruin. They formed a nonprofit organization called the Central Terminal Restoration Corporation, or CTRC, and they made a promise. They would not let the building die. At first, the work was small. The team cleaned up debris, 300 tons of it. Broken windows were sealed with plywood. Security fences went up to keep vandals out. The roof was stabilized to prevent further collapse. Without money for full restoration, they focused on stopping the bleeding, and they started hosting events, tours, concerts, festivals. They invited the public to come inside, to see what remained, to remember what had been lost. Thousands of people came, walking through the concourse with wide eyes, touching the marble walls, standing under the arches, and whispering, "I had no idea." In 2003, something remarkable happened. A city councilman named David Francic was browsing eBay when he stumbled across a listing that made his heart stop. The Buffalo Central Terminal clock. The four-sided golden timepiece that had been sold years earlier was now for sale in a Chicago architectural salvage store. Francic contacted a local radio station, WBen, and together they launched a fundraising campaign. The goal was $25,000 to purchase the clock, plus another $14,000 to restore and maintain it. The response was overwhelming. Buffalonians who had never set foot in the terminal donated. Veterans who remembered leaving for war by that clock sent checks. Families who had said goodbye to loved ones under its golden light gave what they could. M&T Bank stepped forward and paid the full $25,000 purchase price. The additional funds were raised by listeners, and in May 2005, the clock came home. On the day it was installed, hundreds of people gathered in the concourse. There were school children, senior citizens, veterans, and city officials. When the lights inside the clock were switched on, the crowd burst into applause. Some people wept. An elderly woman named Ann Peck stood near the front. She remembered waiting by that clock during World War II, watching for her future husband to step off the train on furlough. "I used to come here and wait for him," she said, tears streaming down her face. The whistle of that train, as it neared this beautiful building, here we were, standing by this clock, and tears would start pouring out of my eyes. The return of the clock meant more than restoration. The gesture declared, "We have not given up. This place still matters. Some things are worth bringing home." Slowly, painfully, Buffalo Central Terminal began to heal. In 2008, capital improvement projects were completed in the restaurant area and entrance. In 2011, the CTRC completed a 3-acre urban habitat project, planting native grasses and flowers to support pollinators and green infrastructure. That same year, the National Trust for Historic Preservation held its annual conference in Buffalo with sessions and receptions at the terminal, national acknowledgement that Buffalo was serious about saving its history. In 2016, the terminal received attention from an unexpected source. The Goo Goo Dolls, a rock band from Buffalo's East Side, filmed a music video in the concourse. That same year, the movie Marshall, a biographical film about Thurgood Marshall, used the terminal as a filming location and contributed $90,000 toward cosmetic upgrades. Suddenly, the terminal was back in the public eye, not as a ruin, but as a living, usable space. In 2017, the World Monuments Fund named Buffalo Central Terminal to its watch list as one of just 25 cultural heritage sites around the world in need of protection. It joined sites like Machu Picchu and the ancient city of Petra. For a building that had once been dismissed as a lost cause, it was an astonishing honor, and the money started to come. In 2018, New York State allocated $5 million for improvements. In 2021, a $10 million downtown revitalization initiative grant was awarded to the terminal and the surrounding Broadway Fillmore neighborhood. In 2022, the CTRC received $61 million through the Regional Revitalization Partnership, a massive public and philanthropic initiative to spur economic growth on Buffalo's east side. By 2023, Phase 2 construction had begun. The goal was to address high-priority safety and structural issues and to reopen the passenger concourse for public access. The roof over the former restaurant was replaced. The tower clocks on the 10th floor, which had been dark for decades, were restored and relit, and developers were chosen to advance the reuse of the terminal with plans for mixed-use development, apartments, offices, event spaces, and possibly even the return of rail service. Walk through the Broadway Fillmore neighborhood today, and the memory of what the terminal once meant lingers in the air. The streets around it still bear the names of Polish heroes: Kosciuszko, Sobieski, Paderewski, reminders of the immigrant families who lived here when the terminal was new. St. Stanislaus Church still stands across the street, its twin spires rising into the sky like prayers in stone. For decades, this neighborhood declined alongside the terminal. Jobs left. Families moved away. Houses fell into disrepair. But now, slowly, hope is returning. New businesses are opening. Young families are moving in. The terminal, once representing abandonment, is becoming a beacon of possibility. Some longtime residents remember the terminal's glory days. They remember going there as children, watching the trains, eating popcorn, feeling like they were part of something important. Others remember the dark years, when the building was a ruin and people were told to stay away, that it was dangerous, that it was lost. But now, when they look at the tower rising above the neighborhood, they see something different. They see proof that even the most broken things can be saved if enough people care. If you visit Buffalo Central Terminal today, you will find a building in transition. Parts of it are still ruins: empty rooms, cracked walls, floors where grass has pushed through the tiles. But other parts have been brought back to life. The concourse, once open to the rain, now has a repaired roof. The tower clocks glow at night, their light visible for miles, just as they were meant to. The entrance lobby, though still under restoration, shows signs of its former elegance: the marble, the arches, the geometric details. And the Buffalo is back. In 2011, a fiberglass replica was donated to replace the plaster statue that had been destroyed. Painted gold, it now watches over visitors in the concourse, just as the original once did. Not the same Buffalo, but carrying the same meaning: strength, endurance, Buffalo. Walk through the terminal on a tour day, and you will see families with children, photographers with cameras, architects with notebooks, and elderly visitors who remember what this place used to be. They stand under the arches, run their hands along the marble, and look up at the vaulted ceilings with wonder. Some cry, some smile, some just stand in silence, letting the space speak to them. The story of Buffalo Central Terminal is not just about architecture. It speaks to timing, vision, and what happens when dreams arrive a moment too late. The railroad's ambition was immense. They believed Buffalo would grow forever, that trains would always reign supreme, that the future was guaranteed. They built a temple to that belief, crafting it with care, beauty, and the finest materials money could buy. They built it to last. But then came change. The automobile and the airplane didn't destroy passenger rail by being better. They destroyed it by offering something trains couldn't: freedom, flexibility, and speed. The world moved on, and the grand stations were left behind. Distance played its part too. The decision to build Central Terminal 2.5 miles from downtown seemed smart in 1925, but doomed the building from the start. Convenience matters. Location matters. A beautiful building in the wrong place remains in the wrong place. Yet memory proved more powerful than abandonment. For decades, Buffalo Central Terminal was forgotten, looted, and left to rot. But people never truly let it go. They remembered the trains, the soldiers, the goodbyes. They remembered the marble and the light and the golden buffalo. And because they remembered, they fought to save it. Today, Buffalo Central Terminal stands as a reminder that cities are not static. They rise, they fall, and sometimes, with enough love and effort, they rise again. In Buffalo, New York, there stands a monument to a promise that was never kept. But perhaps the time has not passed. Perhaps the promise is simply waiting. The trains may never come back in the numbers they once did. The concourse may never again see 10,000 passengers a day. But Buffalo Central Terminal can still serve a purpose. It can be a place of community, of memory, of beauty. It can remind us that progress is not always forward, and that sometimes the most important thing we can do is look back, remember what we built, and decide that it is worth saving. Walk through the concourse today, and the feelings wash over you. The hope that built this place, the sorrow that abandoned it, and the quiet, stubborn belief that it can rise again. Because Buffalo Central Terminal is more than bricks and mortar. It represents a promise, and some promises are worth keeping.